In life, we tend to think of ourselves as the main character. This happened or that happened to me for this or that reason. When in reality, a lot of the times when something interesting is happening around us, you're usually just a product of the right place at the right time. Well, unless you're Drake right now, in which case everything is actually happening to you. Regardless, I say all of this to say that Harold Halibut is a game that evokes this catharsis in me. You play as Harold, who may or may not be autistic, and he has lived his whole life on the Fedora 1, a generational ship that left a doomed Earth with multiple families in hopes of one day finding a new suitable planet to rebuild civilization on. The only problem, the ship crashed, so Harold gets to clean the water filters of a ship that's turned into an underwater city. But as a few major plot lines unfold, it's possible that two things are true. On one hand, Harold finding and discovering certain things is a matter of luck and circumstance. But on the other hand, the charm, thoughtfulness, and empathy of the protagonist sets him above the rest in this wonderfully realized story. Before we get any further, Harold Halibut is a game that was a long time in the making, due to the painstaking process of clay modeling and 3D scanning different assets and environments. The game has finally released for PC and Xbox Series consoles, as well as being day one on Game Pass. Otherwise, it's $34.99 US. And without fence sitting, I do recommend this game if you're interested in the visual style or the storytelling. However, the game is long with very little gameplay variety. So for reasons I'll get into, Harold Halibut stole my heart and my time. The setting of Fedora 1 is the game's strongest asset in my opinion, with unique characters like the flamboyant bodybuilding teacher, the overbearing policeman, and even the quarreling lovers who both play pivotal roles in the story. It's clear off the bat that there's a wide cast of characters to interact with. And one thing I'd actually love to compliment is the game's inclusion of a wide variety of body types. Now before you click off of this video, I swear to God, don't get me wrong, I don't care that they're there. I wouldn't have knocked the game for not having them, but with the models already looking like caricatures, you might as well go all the way with it, and the end result is really interesting. You get a lot of characters that feel very down to earth and homey all at the same time. You want to give each of them a hug, and that's definitely the atmosphere that a lot of this game provides. And the show of quality with the character building doesn't end there either. The voice acting in the game is nothing short of phenomenal. Each voice is unique and stylized with different cadences and deliveries that is really, truly incredible. Whether it be any of the many kids you can find across the station, and also from the trailer it shows that there is alien life forms that can talk, as well as different characters from all different ages, whether you've got the middle-aged guy, the young woman, the older lady, or even the old guy. There's always a bunch of different people that you're going to be hearing from, with different inflections and the way they talk to Harold. Now, I know I just said that the setting of this game is super important to how the game feels, and I've only talked really about characters. But truly, that's what's super important to this game. Talking to these people and helping them or finding out more about them is one of the main gameplay loops. And I mean that truly. To break down the actual gameplay loop, it's this. You talk to someone or you get a message on your datapad, and then you get an objective. It will be marked as a main or a side objective, but really all you have to do is go and talk to someone else, and whether you're collecting an item to take back to the original person or you're doing something to help them, that's it. And most of the time what you're doing is actually in a cutscene once you get to these people. There is not a lot of gameplay variety. There is kind of some map knowledge that you'll get, as you go through each of the different districts, like the arcades, the lab district, the energy district, the social districts. All of these places you can get to very conveniently with the all-water tubes, which this is one of the coolest pieces of world building for this game, is that each of these areas are scattered. As the ship wrecked, none of it stayed intact. So therefore, All Water, one of the corporations that basically runs the governmental system, has created a way to move freely in between each of these. And from a world building perspective, they talk about how you have to have your tickets updated and how, the prices keep going up and up. But from a gameplay perspective, that doesn't impact you at all. But it is a nice flavor touch. Regardless though, that is the biggest bit of progression throughout the game, is that as you go throughout, you are unlocking new areas to get to. Although, I have to say, you're going to see these same locations again and again and again. But what that really provides is an ability to notice the finer attentions to details. You realize that people have crafted each of these environments by hand. And it's in that way that you grow to appreciate why you're seeing these places so much, because how many years or hours have been dedicated to each of these inches and corners of the screen. There are a few minor interactable pieces. One of them was shown in the trailers where you're able to unscrew things or plug in different outlets and things like that. And that can be entertaining. I would have liked to see more stuff like that throughout the game. But by and large, a lot of this game is very safe. It really reminds you of those old adventure games where you have to solve problems and solve issues for people, and you've kind of got a checklist of things to do in order to progress the story. The only difference here is there's really not that many puzzles or bringing items to and fro that you need to kind of use your head for. That, in my opinion, would have been the best way to kind of allow the longevity of the game to go on unobstructed by, I don't want to say boredom, but boredom. I mean, you're going to probably play as long as you're doing at least some of the side objectives, which are very rewarding, by the way. Some of these side objectives and learning about some of these characters, how they interact with one another, are some of the best parts of the game. I mean, the main story is enthralling in the sense that I wanted to see what happened next and next and next, but where the side objectives really come into play is that sometimes you'll notice a noticeable difference on the ship. For instance, one of the minor objectives is that you have seemingly an ex-girlfriend that wants to set up her bake shop in the arcade district. Unfortunately, there's a guy who has a hot dog stand in probably the best traveled area, right by the steps. So she thinks she's not getting the best customers and the best business by not being in the focal point of the whole room. So she asks you to very kindly ask him to relocate, and you go about doing that in your own way as Harold, of course. But upon doing so, she can take up that center stage and hopefully get better, although Harold kind of implies that her cupcakes suck. And it's those little touches like that that are just really, really cool. And not to liken this to like a Tim Burton style movie, because that's not the direct inspiration of this, I don't believe. But that kind of off-kilter tone of kind of solemn and, boring is what follows Harold around. And it's all the interesting things around him that juxtapose a really interesting blend of fun and creativity at all times. Both from, making the game and playing it, but also from the point of the story as well. To kind of itemize everything I really thought about the game, I thought the visuals were always really, really good. All of the character models looked good. There were some complaints online about the fact that with the clay style, everything didn't move at a really low FPS to make it that claymation kind of move it slowly look. But the really smooth movements of the characters actually worked really well for me, especially when the mouths kind of mocked that same low FPS that people wanted. I think that was satisfying enough. But there's a lot of strong colors throughout the game too. I think that works really well. And whenever there were, water shaders to see or particle effects, I actually think it was a really unique style that all fell into that same arts and craft feel that the main visual look of the game has. So in that way, I think it was very universal of high quality throughout. Sound design, I thought there was some annoying sound effects that happened quite frequently, but otherwise the voice acting really carries, and the music for this game. I can't forget to talk about the music. This game has that weird retro feel to it in the way that you could almost imagine a lot of the electronic sounds from this soundtrack are coming from like Star Trek, but also at the same time, one of those nostalgic themes coming from Stranger Things. So it's really hitting you right in that perfect spot of swelling up emotions that just flows really, really well. And the game knows exactly what it's doing, because whenever there's an emotional point in the story or something, it's always compounded with a really strong sound. And while the complete lack of gameplay diversity is my biggest negative for the game, I have to say, I alluded to it earlier, there is one point in the main story of the game, if you were to mainline it, that I feel like you're going to want to get through it as soon as possible, because the pacing is very, very bad in this one aspect. The delivery of new plot details is very slowed down. You're not given a lot of direction. And while it's later in the game and I can't really describe what's going on because I think it is very spoilery by nature, just know that sometimes the game gets away with not really telling you what exactly to do or where you should be going, which with so many options, with all of these different districts and all of these different places, that can be a bit of a problem. Thankfully, I stumbled my way through it relatively easily, but it's something you need to look out for. Thankfully, there's plenty of guides for the game, not that I really felt like I needed them. That being said though, I wanted to kind of lead into a bit of a final verdict. I think this game is really, really good if you know exactly what you're looking for. If you're looking for a game that plays a lot more like a movie than anything, with the only real sense of gameplay flair maybe coming down to the fact that you remember what characters are in what locations, and how to get to those locations efficiently, then I think you're going to have some fun here. Once again, I feel like that feel of checking off these different quests off of your log really harkens back to those old adventure games in a lot of ways, but it misses that same gameplay style. The length of the game is definitely not something that's shortchanged, but at the same time, these adverse gameplay designs do take away from how long the game actually is. If you like the visual style of this game, I definitely recommend checking it out. However, this is one that's really hard to recommend for full price if you're not going to love it. And that really pains me to say because I love this game, but I could very much see why you could not. So with that being said, I think the day one Game Pass is probably the best way to play this game. You can try it, see if you like it, and if you want to play it somewhere else like the Steam Deck or something like that, then you could pick the game up if you really enjoyed what was going for the story as well as the visuals. But otherwise, I believe the best approach is actually to play it on Game Pass. But if I were to say anything about the actual price of the game, I would say wait for sale if you're on the fence. If you've already watched some of it and you think you would like what is presented, then go for it. Regardless though, let me know what you thought down below of the game if you've played it, and if you haven't played it, consider subscribing. This is one of those games I don't feel like I'll ever play again just because of the nature of it, but I'm really, really glad I experienced it, and I hope you are too. Anyway, my name is fallinghurts. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.